That was like an out-of-body experience.
Really?
To be honest, I still can't believe it. There is no words.
What you didn't know about Sydnie Christmas on Britain's Got Talent goes far beyond her gorgeous performances that enthralled millions of people. As fans saw her make history as the first solo with an astounding 27.2% of the public vote, the female artist won the competition in 2024. Few were aware of her struggles prior to taking the stage. Her path to fame, however, wasn't as simple as the show suggested. In spite of confronting criticism on her work history, we'll get the whole truth behind the most recent winner of Britain's Got Talent, who was never disclosed by the producers. Come on. Growing up in the quaint little town of Gravesend, Sydnie's early life. From Kent to the stage, the girl in Kent who always seemed to have a gleam in her eye was Sydnie Christmas. A kind of brilliance that suggested she was meant for greatness, even though no one could fully at the time, they put their finger on it. You know how some children have a little flair from birth? Okay, Sydnie was that person. Long before she appeared on Britain's Got Talent's glitzy stage, and when she got that iconic golden buzzer moment that caused everyone in the country to pause and look, she was simply a normal girl with a voice that, to be honest, was impossible to conceal. Her childhood residence, nestled among the peaceful areas of Kent that frequently reverberated with her singing, whether it was a Broadway song, either something she came up with on the spot or a Disney classic. And is there really anything more endearing? As opposed to a child transforming the living room into a stage? Everyone watched her perform, but did you hear what she said? After the camera stopped rolling, what happened? What caused the judges to become anxious throughout her performance? And what is the one oddly omitted aspect of Sydnie Christmas from the show? Stay tuned, because after you hear the truth about what actually transpired behind the scenes, you'll never again will you watch talent programs in the same manner. Sydnie has been that girl at school since she was small. Community gatherings, you know, the one who would boldly address a crowd, just sing, no matter how large or tiny. Like, full-on, gut-wrenching, goosebumps kind of singing. It was simply in her. It wasn't about flaunting. And the amusing thing is, despite not being the focus of entertainment, Gravesend kind of fostered her in a discreet manner. Whatever it was, Sydnie was present in local gatherings, school plays, and talent shows. She not only took part, but she also made the room brighter. Her professors witnessed it. Her peers witnessed it. It's likely that even the janitor recognized this girl's uniqueness. Everyone continued to repeat, "You've got something." And instead of allowing the compliment to cloud her judgment, she continued working. It gets much better from here. She didn't only sing in front of her family and companions. Sydnie had this passion even as a teenager. You are aware of this sort of resolve that doesn't accept, maybe later, as a response? She was that. Other children were occupied with the weekend. Sydnie was out there working, attending every school performance, hanging out at the mall, or having sleepovers. She volunteered for every solo and performed whenever she could. And let's face it, how many of us had that level of attention when we were teenagers? She won it, but not for the publicity or the glitz, but because she felt alive on stage. As in, truly alive. Naturally, you can only go so far with undeveloped skill. Sydnie was aware of that. At that point, she took the risk. The move that would alter everything was to the DMB Academy of Performing Arts. Consider yourself encircled by an assembly of the most gifted, fervent, and ambitious young actors, all battling for the identical dream. Isn't that intense? However, Sydney flourished in that setting rather than waning. The not just any old school where you sing a few notes and go was DMB Academy. No, it was completely packed. On, vocal drills until you drop and perspire on the dance floor. Sydney gained self-control. She was shoved. She discovered how to use her body as well as her voice to tell a story. Her facial emotions, as well as her quiet. Ever witnessed someone perform a song and make you weep before you've even reached the high note? She was becoming an artist of that caliber. It's important to remember that those years at DMB weren't easy. On some days, she most likely, they wanted to give up. There were times when her voice broke and the choreography simply refused to stick, when things didn't seem to be going well. However, she continued, because she is that person. She was creating a future, one sweat-soaked practice at a time, rather than merely pursuing a dream. Then came Lazarus, the event that truly changed everything. Yes, that Lazarus. David Bowie co-wrote that one. Can you picture that? You're belting out one day. Music in a Kentish living room, and then you're chosen for a groundbreaking West End production. Creation associated with a real-life music icon. Dreams are made of things like that. However, here's the thing. Sydney wasn't simply fortunate. She deserved that position. She entered the audition space. She forced them to see her with all the ferocity and grace she had accumulated over the years. Not only did playing Lazarus at the King's Cross Theatre help my resume, but it was a rite of passage. She was now performing on a stage with seasoned pros, gaining knowledge, forming connections, and picking up the kind of on-the-job training that classroom could ever instruct. What's even more amazing, do you know? She did not falter. This part demanded vulnerability, charisma, and more than just a background chorus. And strength. She also brought everything. She entered the theater as a performing arts student. Arts and left as a fully qualified artist. In retrospect, everything sort of makes sense. Isn't it? From the nascent days in Gravesend to the refined productions in the West End of London, every stage of Sydney's path seems to have been predestined. She did not, however, receive it. It took time. There were innumerable tiny acts of bravery. Singing without being asked, she walked into new places, stayed up late to master a note, and auditioned when she was nervous, where she had to start anew and prove herself. Furthermore, isn't it what makes her story so compelling? Strong? Grit is more important than talent alone. It's about consistently turning up and once more, even if there isn't any applause yet. One artist who reminds us of this is Sydney Christmas. Because dreams are not created overnight. Rather, they are developed over years, via sweat, obstacles, and an unwavering passion for the art. When she finally walked upon that her voice wasn't simply emanating from her lungs on the Britain's Got Talent stage. It was pouring from a little village named Gravesend, a heart that never gave up, and a lifetime of hard work. The secret years prior to BGT now. Let's talk about Sydney Christmas. There is a significant portion of her life, an entire decade, really, that most people didn't see on television, where she was working tirelessly, giving her all to the performance and succeeding, all the while balancing the kinds of daily challenges that far too many of us are familiar with. You understand how sometimes, when someone finally gets their big break, all we notice is the glitz and glamour. Yes, all right, before the sparkle in Sydney's story, there was a lot of roughness. Between her Western debut and end and her spectacular ascent to stardom on Britain's Got Talent, Sydnie was establishing a career that didn't make news, but it was authentic, unvarnished, and filled with those behind-the-scenes moments that molded her into the formidable force that we ultimately witnessed. Let's go back a little. After creating a stir in despite the fact that David Bowie's album Lazarus is already really awesome, Sydnie didn't merely wait around for the next major event. Not at all. After packing her luggage, she set sail. Literally. On cruise liners, she showcased her talents to a global audience. In particular, Royal Caribbean. Have you ever been on one of those vessels? They resemble floating metropolises. And Sydnie rose to fame in those cities. Own sort. She played no part in any of the full-length productions, including Grease. Yes, the Grease. Apart from Rizzo. Could we just take a moment to appreciate that? Rizzo. With her entire soul and sass. Night after night, Sydnie performed timeless songs like "There Are Worse Things I Could Do," delivering Broadway-caliber excitement to tourists from all over the world while sailing from port to port all throughout the world. She also had a totally different vibe as she lit up the stage in the Muse, Starwater. She was the youngest Muse there. It was abstract, dreamlike, and allowed her to showcase a new range of performance muscles. That cruise ship chapter served as a training ground in addition to a work. She had the opportunity to travel, hone her skills, and gain a variety of inspirations. And suddenly, she found herself on her way to Germany. Bochum, specifically. Have you heard of it? Despite being a peaceful city, it is host to a musical theater production of epic proportions, Express Starlight. The following 4 years of Sydnie's life were spent there. For years, known as the leading lady, at least initially, without her name flashing in lights. She began as a swing artist. If you are unfamiliar with that term, consider it as follows. She needed to become proficient in several roles, retain all of the cues, and be prepared to step in at any time. Moment's notice, sometimes without any prior notice. She might play an ensemble role one evening, an entirely different character the following evening. For her, no two shows were ever the same. Can you even comprehend the mental acrobatics required? But what do you know? Not only did she make it through, but she expanded. She rose through the ranks. With time, Sydnie was cast in well-known roles such as Belle the Bar Car and the Luggage Car Carrie. She had the opportunity to fully command the stage during those moments, display her range, and demonstrate that she was more than simply a standby, at least to herself. It's crazy to consider all the years of perspiration, aching feet, missed vacations, and unwavering emotional endurance were all taking place far out of the British public's view. Although her identity was unknown to those at home, Sydnie was out there creating a CV that would make most actors jealous. However, the West's final fantasy. She kept losing it in her fingers. Thus, she and her partner returned to London, presumably anticipating that all of that foreign experience would lead to some opportunities at last. However, the theater scene in London? Brutal. Regardless of her skill level, it always felt as if she were away from completely giving up. What about those auditions? Following one another, rejection after rejection. You get tired of it. It is the type of thing that causes you to wonder, am I good enough? Everything? Do I still have a place here? Real life, however, continued on its way. Her friends were buying homes, getting married, and having children. She was there, working trying to make ends meet while working a 0-hour contract at a gym's front desk at the tryouts. People don't picture that as the glamorous life of a performer, do they? However, it's the authentic, unadulterated aspect of pursuing a dream. She finally got to that point. You're aware of the one where you're finished. The point at when you say to yourself, "All right, this is it. A final attempt. If this doesn't," and that's when Britain's Got Talent entered the picture. Work out. Maybe it's time to let it go. The image. She was frantic to be heard, not because she wanted to be famous, to be observed, to be comprehended. For her, it was more than simply a television contest. It was her final Hail Mary, her last effort to bring the fantasy to life. Well, you already know the rest. The viewers fell in love with her. The judges were unable to turn away. However, now that you are aware of what came before, don't do her performances simply have a deeper meaning? The gym, the harsh German winters, and all those years at sea upheavals, the tears she shed after being rejected, everything contributed to her presence and voice. Her tale. Perhaps this explains why so many people find her relatable. Since she didn't simply she brought life to the stage, not just talent. With personal experience. With each bruising and each note she sung had a hint of her breakthrough. It's funny that the world finally realized. What? However, Sydnie earned that attention long before the cameras were even rolling. Was there something more profound going on with Sydnie Christmas? Or was she just another vocalist with a large voice? Behind that time of the golden buzzer? What caused the audience's dramatic reaction? And why did the producers leave on the floor of the cutting room for convenience? The truth is more shocking than her high notes, so you'll want to stick with us through to the very finish. What we did not see on Britain's Got Talent about Sydnie Christmas, the moment she sung Annie's Tomorrow and had goosebumps, was only the very beginning. She really did own that stage, don't you think? However, what the cameras failed to fully capture and what the majority of people missed was the mountain of emotion, the empty bank account, the years of silent agony, and the countless rehearsals that preceded that won a moment of gold. If you were moved by her performance, you should listen to what she went through before taking the stage. Let's go back a little. Prior to the BGT's Glamour stage, before to Amanda Holden's jaw-dropping, prior to the judges' standing ovation, Sydnie was at rock bottom, she said. Furthermore, this wasn't the typical rock bottom that people use casually during a difficult week. No, we were in full-blown crisis mode. She was 29 years old, getting by in London, which seems like trying, as everyone who has actually lived there knows, to use a paper towel to stay warm during a snowstorm. There were few concerts, the rent was oppressive, and her "Do You Want to Be on the West End?" It seemed to be quietly and agonizingly dying. Refusal once her spirit been eroded by rejection. Imagine giving something your whole being, only to be repeatedly told, "Not this time." How many no's can someone endure before they begin to think they're inadequate? And Sydnie was standing there, at this exact moment, in Turtle Cliff, looking down and wondering if it's still worth it. Can you imagine the sensation of that? To have such a strong affection for something, singing, to feel as though the door is always slamming shut in your face when you're performing or dreaming? It's heartbreaking in addition to being draining. Thus, When she submitted an application to Britain's Got Talent, it wasn't only for publicity or notoriety. However, the prize money wasn't the only factor. To be honest, that would have been beneficial. It was a final attempt. One. In other words, maybe I'll just give up if this doesn't work. She referred to it as her last try, and the weariness and desperation in that sentence were nearly audible. But also, there was a glimmer of hope as well. "Perhaps this is it," said that tiny voice. "Perhaps now is the time." Annabelle Williams then comes in. In case you are unaware, Annabelle is that vocal coach. The type that can find a diamond hidden beneath all the strain and polish it till it pops so dazzling, you can't take your eyes off it. She has collaborated with well-known artists including James Arthur and Sam Smith. She doesn't play around, you know that. However, with Sydnie, this was no ordinary client-coach dynamic. This was more profound. Something in Sydnie caught Annabelle's attention. She was able to see past her nervousness and dread, and into the fire that, despite its dimness, was still burning inside her. They worked together on more than simply regulating breath and nailing high notes, though Sydnie's ability to regulate her voice. Crazy. They explored each word's underlying feeling. They inquired, "You're singing this song, but why? For you, what does it mean? What emotions do you wish the audience to experience when you sing, 'Tomorrow the sun will shine'?" Furthermore, let's face it, when Sydnie performed, you sensed it. Her tale was evident in every note. Every door that was closed could be heard. Every quiet sob. Every young girl who dared to dream and persisted. That sort of susceptibility? It's impossible to fake that. You develop that when someone likes you. Annabelle restores your self-confidence. And here's something else that folks frequently forget. Being talented is one thing, but having support from others is quite another. That makes all the difference. Annabelle was more than just a trainer. She was vital. During the times when Sydnie most likely asked, Annabelle's soft yet forceful voice made her question if she still had the right to pursue her ambitions, stating, "You do. You're not alone either." Thus, as Sydnie entered the stage, she was more than a hopeful competitor. She was a woman who had persevered to reach her goal. She took with her every restless night, unpaid invoice, and muttered mistrust. She put all of that into the music as she opened her mouth to sing. That's why it was so strong. The judges appeared on the verge of tears because of this. Because what we heard was a soul that would not be hushed, not just a song. And really, how many of us have experienced that one dream that seems so near yet so far away?